Welcome back to Become a Calm Mama. I'm your host. I'm Darlene Childress. And today on the podcast, I've invited Sara Hartley to join me for a conversation about raising neurodivergent kids. I really appreciate what Sara is doing in the world. She has written a series of books called Purposefully Me that are meant to help kids navigate big feelings and learn more about different ways that people show up with autism, with ADHD, how bullying affects kids, how school drills can affect you, just kind of topics that might be hard to talk about with kids. She's written stories that put those conversations into a narrative form so that you can read those with your kids and talk about these difficult conversations. Sara has also created a parenting method called Align that is very similar to the connection tool that you have learned about on my podcast. And in this conversation with Sara, we walk through her parenting method and walk through the steps of Align, which is a tool that you can use that will help you handle those very difficult moments with your kids when things start to seem out of bounds or out of control, or they start complaining, or there's a lot of overwhelm going on. What you can say and do to help reset the situation and bring your kids back online in a way that isn't just like, stop it, don't do that anymore, enough, right? And we go through an example where she practices this philosophy with her own kids. And I think you're really going to love learning about Align. I also really enjoyed this conversation because Sara and I have both experienced raising neurodivergent kids and the challenges that come with that. And we sort of talk war stories a little bit and talk strategy about how we've learned to cope with our kids being neurodivergent and how to kind of get ourselves through those hard moments. So please enjoy this conversation with Sara Hartley. I think you're going to love her and you're going to love learning about her work in the world and just how much we are like little like-minded spirits together doing this parenting work. So please enjoy this conversation. Hi, Sara.
Hi, how are you?
Good. I'm Darlene.
Nice to meet you, Darlene.
Nice to meet you too. I'm so happy to have you on the Become a Calm Mama podcast.
I am happy to be here.
Yeah, good. So I'm really happy to have you on here. When your team reached out to talk about your books, the whole series, Purposefully Me, I, dug in to figure out like who you were and everything like that. And I just thought you were so perfect for my audience because our goals in parent education really align in, emotional intelligence and helping moms and dads feel more calm and capable when they're raising their kids. And so I just was like, oh, great. This is perfect for my podcast listeners. And I wanted to introduce them to you and your work. So welcome.
Oh, well, thank you again for having me. I've listened to many of your podcast episodes, and it sounds like we are very similar and talking about the same things. And so I love that alignment. So many that I've been on, it's a different maybe perspective that they're bringing in. And I think that you and I are speaking the same language.
Yeah, I know. And sometimes it's like, oh, well, is that even useful to have the same thing? But I actually think it is really helpful. I want to talk about your Align method and introduce that to my audience. Anything that I can offer to a mom to help them feel more confident as a parent, I'm like, yes. So I'm really glad to have you. So I wanted to talk first about you, like where your story, your background, especially you identify as a neurodivergent mom. So I wanted to talk about what that means for you and then raising your kids and what, however much you feel comfortable with, and then getting into the parenting stuff and the book and the book series and all of that. So tell us about you, Sara. How did you become involved in parent education and what's your story?
Thank you for asking me that question. It's can be a detailed one, but something that I didn't realize I would ever be on the path to do. And it really wasn't until I had my oldest son and around 1.5 to 2 years old, we started noticing some behavioral issues or just some aggressive behavior. But we had also noticed that he was surpassing every milestone. And so it was this interesting element of noticing that he was cognitively ahead of the game, but social emotionally behind, which that gap between the two things really can cause for some explosive emotional behavior with your, almost 2 year old.
Yeah,
And
actually,
so,
I'm going to poke in every once in a while because I have a similar story with my oldest, and maybe you can relate to this. Is I I would read the parenting books, and so say I'm reading about 18-month-old, and I would be like, well, he doesn't do any of this, but he does some of the like 9-month-old behaviors and some of the 3-year-old behaviors. Like he never was quite right on target with what I was reading and all the little, developmental stages and what to expect and all of that. And but yeah, sometimes really far ahead in verbal processing, communicate, whatever it was for him. And then other times social, emotionally, self-regulation was so far behind. And I was like, I don't know what to make of it. So
yes.
how did you feel when you were like, wait, what's going on here?
Yes, it was an eye-opening moment. I was speaking with one of my really good friends who's actually an OT in the school system, and she works mostly with neurodivergent kids, whether they have autism or ADHD. And she said, "Have you ever thought that maybe your son is gifted?" And I said, "Oh, I haven't really thought about that." And I don't really know exactly fully what that means, as it almost took me to the movie where it seems like more on an autism spectrum of of being gifted. And she said, you might want to look at some sensory processing stuff as well as ADHD. And so that was at the point where we went down that path. We started through Child Find. We took the full sensory processing disorder assessment because there were times where we thought potentially he had it, but it wasn't really until I had my second child where all of those symptoms really exacerbated. And all of a sudden, things that, once in a while it was the tag is too itchy or sounds are too loud, to really noticing that he was actually avoiding certain vestibular activities like swinging or riding a bike. And then also really pushing for the proprioceptive input. So he was crashing on the ground, or just making big movements and things that we were trying to figure out what exactly is going on. And so from there, we went through some testing with him, found out that he is highly gifted. He has sensory processing disorder, and at that time was mild ADHD. They even tested him for OCD and the defiance disorder and autism, but he fit more into the sensory ADHD kind of gifted bucket, which really makes him twice exceptional. And so it was at that point that while I had had a late diagnosis of ADHD at 25 years old, I was just given that medication and said, go on your way. And no strategies were ever implemented. I never spoke with anyone about it. And so it really was eye-opening for me. And I think that many mothers can feel this resonates with them when they say that you will do anything and everything for your child and you might neglect your own health as well. And so it wasn't until it was my son that was going through this that I said, I have to figure out what this is. I have to figure out, how to parent. I had read all the books. There were many, I took positive parenting courses. I did all of those things, but it still wasn't working. And because his intellect was so high, he was outsmarting every strategy that we tried. So it was really time for him to start seeing an OT, to work on the sensory piece, and then a play therapist for some of that emotional regulation as well.
Yeah. Wow. Did you feel like, I know for me and for some of the moms that work, like, what am I doing wrong? Like, you have this kid who's a little bit explosive, maybe outside of typical, you're talking to other moms and they're like, at first, this is how it was for me. Like, I would have a conversation with another mom and we would be like, yeah, yeah, that's my kid too, that my kid. And then I'd say one more thing and they'd be like, but we haven't had that. No, like they had this funny face and these kind of like, whoa. And I found myself a little bit like, am I doing something wrong or is something wrong with my kid? And I don't know that it's like a deeper sense of fear of like something's wrong here or I'm not doing it right. Did you have that?
Absolutely. All the time. I think it brought me a tremendous amount of anxiety. the guilt and the shame, especially if we were in a public place and maybe that meltdown was occurring, or every day going to pick him up from preschool and having that moment of, oh, I hope we don't get an incident report today,
Yeah.
and just knowing that there is this element of fear every single day that we might come, walk into something even bigger.
Hmm.
Fortunately, and there was another little boy who they were best friends, but they also, butted heads, and the parents were awesome. Long, like, ended up having a connection to them with one of our other friends, had gone to high school with the dad. And so great people still are friends with them today. And so that mom had already gone through some of the child find process. And at that point, we had not quite hit the pandemic yet. And so we were able to even go on some play dates with that young child with the therapist there so they could watch the two of them interact, and they're the exact same kid. They both have ADHD. They're both hyperactive. They both had the aggressive behavior. It was, one day my son comes home with a giant bite mark on his cheek right before picture day. And then, I guess my son had thrown something at her child had a black eye. So, we were very thankful that it tended to be the two of them that were usually mixed up in all of it. And so we were very empathetic of one another when that happened. But if it ended up being someone else who, they had a neurotypical child and their child is, maybe a sweet little girl and something happened, then your heart just breaks even further of
Oh.
what am I doing wrong and how do I help my child to just be calm in the classroom because they
Mhm.
weren't getting their needs met. I mean, I watched my child, he was best friends with the teacher. That was where he would get his social interaction because they could talk on the same level at 2 and 3 years old. And he'd become frustrated with the other children if, they didn't immediately understand what he was trying to do.
Yeah. It's very hard when you have preschoolers and that feeling of what is the teacher going to say to me today, and what are the other parents thinking? And of course, we all do think like that's parenting, right? Like there's some kind of parenting issue. And as much as I wish we didn't think that, people do think that, and the teachers think that, and the other parents think that. And but when you're raising a neurodivergent kid or a kid who has, a lot of trouble with emotional regulation, maybe that's trauma or, medical condition, it could be different things. Uh, it's like you kind of want to be like, I'm doing all of it. I promise I'm super mom over here. I'm trying so hard. And it's like, I think if there could be a takeaway, maybe give some benefit of the doubt to a mom who has a kid who maybe is the naughty one in the class or the one who keeps getting in trouble or whatever it is, that she's probably doing her best and maybe there's more going on with that child than you know or understand. I just wish people would have given me that.
Oh, yes. A little ounce of empathy and patience can go a long way. And I never realized how much I was actually doing until we decided to try to see if our son could go to early access to kindergarten because he was very tall. So, while he's having these behaviors, he's a head taller than the rest of the children. He only missed the cutoff by 10 days. And so we started through the gifted and talented program. And during that process, having to write down all of the things that were reasons why he was gifted and what we had done to support him. And so it was nice to have this ton of whether it was OT or, early intervention or play therapy, all the books, the courses, and you don't realize you feel like you're not doing enough until that's on paper. And then you have a moment of, okay, maybe I am, but it doesn't
Mhm.
help all of the guilt. And so for me, I've had many of those aha moments in the shower of just almost total meltdown and breakdown of like, what is my purpose? Why am I here? Why is all of this happening? And that was actually for me what sparked writing my first children's book was really in that low moment. And I've had to find the tools that actually work for me because I've read the books and some of them didn't necessarily resonate with me or maybe were too technical until I read Dr. Becky Kennedy, Good Inside. That one was the first one where I felt like this is the holy grail of all children's books because it was just speaking to how they're all good people on the inside. They just don't know how to regulate their emotions and they don't have that emotional intelligence yet. So we have to be the ones to show them how to regulate their own bodies.
Yeah. Yeah, sometimes people would say to me like, what intervention did made the most difference? Because my son is highly gifted with ADHD, and then my other son has pretty severe sensory processing and an eating disorder. So between the two, I just was constantly trying to figure out strategies that would work, and all of my parenting methodology and belief system and everything is born out of, parenting these kids. But well, and my education and whatever, all the stuff. But um, when I think about all the interventions, the one that made the biggest difference is recognizing feelings driving behavior, recognizing that this is emotional dysregulation. It's not because they're sociopathic or self centered or, you know, like I remember being so scared that my son was like going to grow up and be, a mass murderer or something. I just didn't
Same.
understand. Yeah.
I had the same moment and thought. That was
Uh-huh.
literally like with all the school shootings, would that ever be my child?
Yes.
And how do I put everything in place to make sure that it's not?
Right, right. And really, all of the strategies and things that we've done, the interventions we've done, all have made a huge impact on our son, who's now 21 and grown and in college and doing great. But it really was when I stopped and realized that this was a kid having a hard time, right? That whole like, they're not giving you a hard time, they're having a hard time thought. And this was in, 2006, 7. This was long before there was Instagram or anybody talking about emotional dysregulation. I remember using the words dysregulation, and it's not, doesn't even come up in it. Spell check always wants to fix the
Yes.
spelling of it. And amygdala and stress response and nervous systems and like all of that, that's now kind of parent education really is centered around that. It wasn't at the time. And I was like, my brain just kind of exploded in understanding, whoa, he really needs me to come alongside of him and not just time out and take away and scream or whatever I was doing, and slow it all down and connect. And that's like what your work is and what my work is. And it is the best strategy that we have at our disposal, and it's always available. What are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. It's interesting because I never knew that I had my own triggers. And the hardest part about parenting a neurodiverse child is being neurodiverse yourself. And most of my life, I felt like I was pretty even keel, I was never really, I wouldn't get super upset about things, maybe as a child for sure, but as an adult, not very often. Everything was kind of grateful for everything. Everything was good. And, I always at that time had more time to work out and, or be on a sports team where I was, getting out all of that energy that I needed to. And so it wasn't until I started parenting that I noticed, now I'm yelling. Now I'm
Yeah.
really frustrated. Now I'm thinking it's a reflection of my own parenting. And I have that shame and guilt and all of that compounding with a deeply feeling child who feels the world, the weight of the
Mhm.
world, all of your emotions. I'm the same way. I can walk into a room and in a couple of seconds know if this is a good person or a bad person, or just based, or maybe I don't want to be here based on that energy. And both of my children are that way as well. And so if they're feeling my tension and my stress, that's not going to help anyone. And so I need to make sure that I'm regulating myself. It's the same scenario as, putting on your oxygen mask on an airplane first before you help someone else. You have to regulate your own emotions and find out what works for you before you can help your child and be, as you said, alongside of them for the
Mhm.
ride and realize it's not personal.
Yeah.
They're not trying to disrespect you. And I feel like that is a word that's often misused when it comes to children who are neurodiverse or having big feelings. They're not trying to disrespect you. They just don't know how to handle it. All of
Yeah.
the sensory input, all of the emotions that are happening. And if we teach them correctly of how to mirror our own emotional regulation, then they're going to turn out to be just like your son, 21 and thriving.
Yes. And, I obviously to become a calm mama is all about this, right? This kind of deeper sense of internal regulation and noticing when we're dysregulated, doing strategies that help us, like whether that's exercise or, having a nice cup of tea before the kids get up or talking to a friend. Like we have all these outlets and we need to, activate those things in our lives that help us stay calm and feel calm deep inside. And then of course the mindset around behavior, when we really deeply understand that a child's misbehavior is really a form of communication or a way of coping. And it can make us actually calmer when we believe that and we feel that way. But when I talk about, I'll say to a mom, that our kids borrow our nervous system, they get really overwhelmed. Like, well, that's a lot of responsibility, and I'm not always calm. And it's like, even if you are dysregulated as a mom and you work through your own, getting back to calm, like my strategy, the pause break that people listening will know, and then we'll talk about your strategies. It's like, even while you're regulating yourself, then your children's borrowing that as well. So it's so powerful just to learn the skills for yourself. Your kids are going to learn them by experiencing them alongside of you, and then you helping your kids when you're seeing that they're off track. Like, what do they need to do to reset and recalm their own body and nervous system? So it's like sometimes moms will get overwhelmed with the idea that if you're dysregulated, you're going to dysregulate your kids. And it's like, well, okay, that could be upsetting. But at the same time, when you learn to do it, then your kids learn to do it. And that's really hopeful.
Yes.
Yeah.
And those moms are probably really burnt out and need a break. I do too, even though I do practice the calming piece, but
Yes.
it opens up some wounds of the past for sure when you're really trying to work on yourself and you have to find what's going to help calm yourself because we're constantly in this state of flight, fight, freeze,
Yeah.
all fawn, all of that. And when you're always in that heightened state, you're just at that tipping point of explosion,
Yeah.
every time. And the littlest thing that, on a calmer day, or maybe it was early in the morning, you haven't, had as much time to have those little things that happen throughout the day that, deplete your emotional system. So if you think of it like a glass of water, and it's depleted and you're not filling that cup back up, you can react very extremely and harshly to something that maybe if several hours before you wouldn't have had that problem,
Yeah.
and it would have been much easier. Or for women, so much as many women are being diagnosed with ADHD in perimenopause or menopause, it's not because ADHD wasn't always there. It was most likely underlying, but it's now been exacerbated with the symptoms that come along with your cycle. And I think
Mm-hmm.
we can all notice if you're tracking it, there are certain times throughout the month of where there is going to be that heightened response and reaction. And those are the times you have to give yourself more grace. And that's the
Right.
biggest piece of it because we all mess up. None of us are perfect. And when we do, we have to follow that connection over trying to make sure that we're right. We have to be
Mm-hmm.
able to connect with our children and make sure that they feel seen.
Yeah. Sometimes I think of it as like not parenting. Like sometimes we're parenting and sometimes we're relating, and it's like there's days when you realize I'm not going to be able to reteach this new boundary, like that they aren't putting their shoes in the shoe bin, like, or whatever. And you're just finding yourself yelling about that. Or like, we've talked about this. I've told you, you need to bring your jacket into the, right, all this stuff. And it's like some days you just go put the shoes in the shoe bin. Some days you just roll off the jacket and you just put a pin and decide to deal with it on another day. And I think of those as like, I'm not going to parent today. And I give myself permission to, sometimes I think I've talked about this like fix it, fuck it cycle where I'll get into this like fix it energy where I'm like, really needing to, I'm like, have a lot of adrenaline or I'm angry or I'm frustrated with something and I want to like solve all the problems in my family. And then I'm afraid though, if I just let it go, that I'll be like, fuck it. And I won't get into I won't come back, circle back. And learning, no, if this shoe thing is bothering me, I can put a pin in it, table it, not talk about it today, and make a note in my mind. Okay, obviously this routine isn't taught well, or this way that they're speaking to me right now is something I want to work on, but not today. It's like permission to not handle everything on those days when, like you're saying, your cycle is, you don't have as much bandwidth as you normally would, or you don't have as much emotional regulation that you normally would. I also think of it in the mornings. Like, no parenting should happen in the mornings
No.
because nobody is open for that. It's just time to get everyone out the door.
Ugh.
And yeah, work on the routines and the behavior and the sassy and whatever is bothering you, like later or another week, another day. You have plenty of time.
And
Um,
some
mhm.
of it, I wonder if, it's how we were raised and how we were parented that we're somehow supposed to remember all of these things. And, like you said, putting your jacket in the right place or
Yeah.
the shoes in the right place or remembering your water bottle from school or practice or wherever it is. And then the more that I dig into understanding ADHD and understanding more neurodiversity, it's like that is actually something with working memory where they literally have out of sight, out of mind and trouble remembering those specific details. And so, again, back to the disrespect thing, they're not trying to be, but we have to be able to provide those systems to put in place for them as reminders. Or, I think about now, I used to have a memory that was very photographic and I could remember every single thing at work. And then I had children. I think they took all of my memory and intelligence and all of that along with it. But with that, now I have to live by my Outlook calendar. If it's not on my calendar, it's not happening. And so when we think about what could they have, if it's a checklist or some sort of strategy or system that they have in place where, their backpack is right by the door as they go out, or their whatever they're taking to basketball or flag football or soccer or whatever it might be is sitting there, waiting for them, that's going to help them instead of this moment of, oh, we've got to go quickly, which I do a lot. And I will hyper focus on something. And it's very hard for me to stop and move and then transition into the next thing, go pick them up. Now I've got to put a different hat on, no longer working, or my mom's hat on.
Mhm.
And then it happened the other day. We got to flag football practice on Friday night. My husband's out of town. I had both kids get there. And I didn't think about the cleats, didn't think about bringing. I brought the mouth guard. He had all of this. He had every single component that he needed, and I thought he was wearing shoes. Then we get out of the car, and I say, "Oh my gosh, do you have your flip-flops on?" He said, "Well, you told me not to wear my nice shoes up to practice because I just got them. So, or up to the game, and thankfully their practice is an hour before the game. So we ran really quick to the store. He needed new tennis shoes anyways, and I because has a much larger foot than every other child on the team. And so I had to quickly, but that was my fault. It
Yeah.
was a quick transition and my husband wasn't there to kind of recount the things that we have to make sure that we get. And just, I went and the game was 45 minutes from our house. There was no way I was able to turn around,
Yeah.
come home, get another pair of shoes, or we would have missed it. So, we mess up too, and we have to show them that we make those mistakes and that it's
Mm.
okay to make those mistakes. We just try harder next time, and it's not even trying harder because that's harder for them to do, but maybe have some sort of checklist that both of us have. These are the items we need to put in your bag for flag football, and
Yeah.
then let's check them off before we go out the door.
Right. And in those moments, not dumping all that stress and overwhelm on our kids, it's really tricky. And of course, when we do that, just forgiving ourselves and making repair. Um, and yeah, having a lot of self forgiveness, like, well, looks like I have to buy new shoes. I don't know. Let's just pivot, solve the problem, and deal with how we got here and how we avoid this. Just dealing with that later, just kind of putting that problem solving, like long term problem solving, onto the side and just doing like short term. I always just think how much can I deliver emotionally regulated people to wherever's next. Like, if that's my goal, to have the most emotionally regulated human I can at the flag football game or at school or wherever, at dinner, even in my own house. If that's my mindset, usually then I have enough bandwidth left to talk about, nope, remember, no toys at the table. Let's try again. Or taking a minute to be like, do we have everything? You know, because I'm more focused on everyone's being calm, then I have more brain power. not always, obviously, you run late, blah, 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 um, forget something. But in general, when we're able to just kind of focus on that emotional, like, how's everybody doing and slowing it down, there are less mistakes made oftentimes. Do you find that true?
Oh, absolutely. And
Yeah.
it's two of if I can allow myself that time in between picking them up. And I think in my mind, I had basketball was the night before. So I had basketball shoes in my mind. I wasn't thinking about cleats and I had moved them somewhere else. So we have to give ourselves that moment too. And a year ago, I probably would have blown up and said, why didn't you have those? But now that I'm really fully ingrained in actually using the aligned parenting method that I've developed and making sure that I can abide by the things and practice what I am preaching, we really made light of it. And I'll tell you, he was pumped. He's like, I've been asking for new tennis shoes. And of course, and thankfully they both have birthdays this week. One's
Oh.
tomorrow and one's on Friday. And so they said, and of course, my little one's like, well, that means I get tennis shoes too, right? I'm like, oh man, do we have time for this? No, but whatever, you're missing practice at this point. So I don't really, it's fine.
Yeah.
And they both were super pumped to get a new pair of shoes. So we turned what would have, was a little bit of them fighting at the beginning, home from school and just having kind of that Friday afternoon, energy to, making a big mistake, but then turning it into something fun. They were both so excited afterwards. And we ended the night really on a great note.
Mm.
Sometimes those sports can be frustrating for him. He did end up on a younger team this year because he doesn't meet that cutoff. And a friend just said, hey, they've already closed registration, but do you want to come join? And we said yes and didn't really know what we were getting into. So my son's almost 9, there's some 6-year-olds on the team. And
Yeah.
so he's left some games frustrated and, just they're not up to the same playing level. And, they're trying to be equal on playing time. And I said, this isn't like your competitive basketball league. This is just supposed to be fun.
Hmm.
Let's have fun. And this time he walked away actually really happy. I made sure they ate beforehand, which is a big thing. Are they hangry? So
Yeah.
that actually changed the entire night for us.
Mm.
And the one mistake turned into a great evening.
Yeah. And it can for sure. We can pivot from these moments and just kind of find like, how do I make this okay? And I always think of choosing peace and harmony over stress and perfection. And it's like, how can I make this the most peaceful or the most harmonious or the most, you know, calm experience, even though it's not been great, right? Like, even though we have now to pivot and make this big, buying shoes, all of a sudden you're like, where's DSW or whatever you're trying to figure out, at the
Yes.
time. Um, yeah. So your boys are how old now?
They're this week, they'll be 6 and 9.
6 and 9. Yeah. So they're like right in those elementary school years. And you're in that stage where you're driving everywhere and everyone's got sports and birthday parties and
Oh,
school
yes.
stuff going on and right, all of that.
All of it.
Yeah.
Apparently, kindergarten, my youngest is kindergarten, my oldest is fourth. And I guess everybody invites the whole class, and there are a lot of birthdays in September and October. So
Hmm.
my little one has had multiple birthdays every weekend, I think, since school started. So
Right.
and before, he had maybe soccer or one thing he was doing, and now his is
Hmm.
starting to ramp up, which is adding another layer of complexion to our already crazy schedules.
Yeah. I know. It's someone has been describing it as like the family years. And now that I'm out of those years, I recognize, yeah, the time you're in is like you're building your family, you have your family, you're doing all these family focused things. It's it's a season that's very, very intense. And in that, especially you talked about being ADHD yourself, it's like when I think about ADHD, I often think about how it's difficult to create a template of order. Like, so if there's something chaotic or out of order or how to do the sequential things that need to happen, like go to flag football, creating that sense of order can be very taxing. So for a kid, it's almost impossible for a kid with ADHD to think through the things unless they're being really coached and guided. But then you add this other level for yourself where it's a lot of work for you also to think through what needs to happen and the timing of it all and how much time. Like my son, he underestimates how long something will take and overestimates his capacity. Like
I
he's
resonate with that.
yeah.
Yes.
um, and he can get things done faster than a typical neurotypical person because he can hyper focus. And I love the ADHD brain. I don't have one. And I found it hard to raise a kid with ADHD because of the you're like, hello, just there was this funny Instagram video of some little cartoon learning to like cooking something, and there was an ADHD person, and like while they're pretending to cook the pasta or whatever, they're like making a band, pretending they're singing. They've turned the spaghetti into guitar. They're all of a sudden over there making a snack while they're making food. It's just so chaotic. And I was like, this is exactly what it's like to have my son around me. Um, but I'm wondering for you, if there's any moms listening who are also neurodivergent, what are things that you do to help you, you know, like organize, like you said, the Outlook calendar, but just even thinking through all of the different things that need to happen before a birthday party on a Saturday. And it's that I like, wow, it must be challenging. So tell us how it is for you.
It is challenging. I think of it when you have all of the tabs open on your computer and you're thinking of, all the different websites that you might have or different, you have Excel files and PowerPoints. All of that is what's happening in my brain at all times. There are just multiple tabs that are open. And like you said, unless it's something very urgent, I can very easily adapt and respond to something that's super urgent and hyper focus. And like you said, produce very good work in a short amount of time. So the idle time is almost what I struggle with more of. When we have these back to back things, it's like, okay, one thing, next thing. And, it kind of goes in that order of operation
All the
where,
dopamine is firing
yes,
and you're
yeah,
doing great. You're
yes,
uptaking it. Yeah. Uh-huh.
yes. And then when there's maybe a little downtime, or if there are way too many things going on, it's hard to figure out where do I even start. And
Yes.
so for me, going on a walk is one of the number one things that I do,
Mm.
especially in the morning. I take our dog for a walk every morning. There's an element of where your eyes are kind of scanning the pavement back and forth that's very similar to EMDR therapy. And so that in and of itself, whether I'm usually listening to a parenting podcast or self-help podcast or even doing a meditation where I'm doing the 5 4 3 2 1 grounding technique. It's a walking meditation. But there are some days, like you said, where I don't have the capacity to listen and take all of that in. And so it might be that I'm listening to music very loudly. And there are other days that I just can't listen to music and I need that calm softness to really help overall emotionally regulate me. So that walk, I'll come back. And then it seems like after that happens, now I have the capacity to determine, okay, which one of these really is the most important? Because I have a hard time taking breaks. I think just taking breaks to eat or have water or go to the bathroom, those are just simple things that a neurotypical person might be like, yes, I take a long lunch or I take this. For me, I need to focus and kind of, I have that mentality of just banging it all out at once. I kind of relate it to whenever if we were to go skiing, thinking about, I only want to ski in the morning. There's people who will break for lunch. And I feel like when that happens, now I'm prone to injury in the afternoon. Like I would
Hmm.
rather just go for 3 or 4 hours, be done, and power through it all, and then now I can go relax. If I start try to relax in between, I'm going to get sidetracked. I'm not, somehow I'm going to be off my game when I come back, and that happens with work as well. And so I'll find myself like, okay, you have to got to go take 10 minutes to go downstairs, grab something to eat, or I'll even leave snacks at my desk at home just to make sure that I'm trying to eat something in between meetings.
Yeah.
So making sure that I have fuel
Yeah.
and food and water and simple things. And then also just the calming method that I go through is more of marrying the ability to have metacognition and becoming aware of what's happening in your surroundings and really switching from that just, okay, things are happening around me to I am understanding how I'm feeling in this moment with grounding techniques and the element of nurture to pull all of those things together. So I'm happy to walk through
Yeah,
that
let's
aligned
do
method
that.
with you if
Hmm.
that
Please.
works.
Yeah,
So that
please do.
and I'll walk through the letters and then I'll go through an example. So the A is for awareness. The L is for listen and label. I identify, The G is for grounding and N is for nurture. And so the way that I've used this before, I can give you an example of where we were at a Savannah Bananas baseball game. They're kind of a phenomenon right now in baseball where they're selling out major league stadiums. So they have it where you can come to the stadium and it's like 4 hours before the actual game starts. You can meet the players, have the ball signed, similar to the Harlem Globetrotters in that sense. And so we were there. It was very hot. It was in August in Denver, Colorado. So we had a really hot day that day. And we were waiting in line. We were probably in line for about an hour or so. And my oldest starts saying, this is boring. I don't want to be here. I don't like this. And you start to get frustrated yourself thinking, oh, it was so hard to get these tickets. We spent all this money, you should just suck
Be
it up and like
grateful,
it.
kid.
Yeah, yeah, be grateful. And then you have this moment. And I said, okay, I need to align with him, become aware of my own feelings. Is my chest tight? My palms sweating? Is my heart racing? Now, look at the surroundings and listen to what's happening and listen to your child. It's hot out here. It is, there are all of these factors coming in. I'm feeling really overwhelmed. I'm labeling that emotion. He must also be feeling really overwhelmed. Now we are identifying what are those triggers. It is how hot it is. We've been standing in line. It's extremely crowded. There are so many people around. There's a ton of sensory smells coming into play. You've got the food in the stadium. You've got the just trash on the street. So you're this mixture of heat and awful smell. And all of those things are just a sensory overload that I said, oh, wow, okay. I'm also feeling this way. So I can see why he's feeling that way. And so I whispered to him in that moment. I said, hey, buddy, I'm feeling really overwhelmed. My hands are sweating. I'm sweating all over. My heart's beating fast. I think you're feeling really overwhelmed too because of all the crowd, the sounds, the smells. I said, why don't we just do a quick little grounding exercise? Let's drink a sip of water. That's going to reset your central nervous system. Now name three things that are purple. We're in the Rocky Stadium, so there's plenty of purple around. And then I said, I feel you, buddy. Like, this is a lot. It's a lot for me too. So I really had that compassion and empathy for him. And I said, do you want to go inside? It looks like the line's moving, or do you really want to go home? And we have your ball. We can get your ball signed. He said, no, let's go. So in the matter of that moment, it took less than 60 seconds to do, but it's really that element of becoming aware, becoming a detective, identifying those triggers, and then moving into what is an actionable step that truly will calm your body. And so finding the element of grounding that really works for you or works for your child, simple as sipping water, or maybe it's the 5 4 3 2 1 if you have a longer time frame. A friend of mine used this at a concert with her son, and they were supposed to be sit down, and they did I Spy, and he sat in her lap, so they had that connection piece. But she really empathized because she was getting frustrated as well. And it allows for them to see that they're not alone in those really intense feelings that are
Yeah.
happening.
Yeah.
And then if it's, you can do this on your own as well. It might be that either you're doing it so your child can mirror you, you're doing it with them, or if you're just doing it by yourself, the nurture piece comes into play to give yourself grace. Whisper to yourself, I am a good mom.
Hmm.
I can be calm. Like, this is okay. And I am going to get through this. So you basically give yourself a pep talk, you give them a pep talk, and then you can go on your way. But it takes that moment to come back before you can actually move forward.
Yeah, so good. What a beautiful example and what a great tool to really, be able to walk yourself through. So it's awareness, listen
Listen,
and
label.
label, and then identify. So the labeling is kind of labeling what could be happening, identify as more out loud then.
So think about the listening and labeling. You're noticing that your child's probably experiencing the same thing. I'm
Right.
feeling overwhelmed. The identify is it's the heat in the crowd that is causing this. Or it might be
Okay.
that,
Identify the trigger. I
yeah,
see.
identify the trigger.
Hmm.
So it might be
Hmm.
that your child is transitioning from school.
Yep.
Sometimes what I've noticed when they are really using a, mean tone or sassy or whatever it is that day, something else happened at school.
Yep.
And maybe that really triggered them, and or maybe some friend that was mean or said something,
Hmm.
or maybe it was a lot of homework, or maybe they were embarrassed by something. So I usually try to dig deeper. 9 times out of 10, there is a reason of why. And
Yeah.
especially for these neurodiverse kids, a lot of times it's sensory overload of some
Hmm.
sort or a
Hmm.
transition. So
Yeah.
if you can get curious, it's very difficult to hold that empathy and be angry at the same time.
Yeah, it's not possible.
Yeah.
It's not possible. You have to go
Yeah.
through that. You're either in critical or you're not. You're either
Yeah.
judging the behavior, emotion as valid or not, or you're neutral or go into curiosity. Um, so I think of awareness and like for people who listen to our my podcast, it's like if they want a connection for you don't need to worry about this, but it's really like the connection tool. So people who are listening can kind of connect what we're talking about to what they've already maybe learned in the last, on this podcast. But awareness is so fascinating because it really requires us to get out of our head around whether or not like our kids being a jerk, right? Because you like we were
Mhm.
joking about how our first instinct is like, we drove you here, we bought these tickets, we're not even getting anything from this. This is for you. Like how many critical thoughts we can have. And I think of it like a line is really around, compassion and regulation, right? Like kind of deep understanding of why someone's behaving the way they're behaving and then helping them through that. And it can be very challenging to practice that when you are immediately feeling angry that your kid is complaining or that they're fighting with their brother again. Or it's like, what are your tips to help someone who's like, I can't get to a line because I become aware, but I can't get out of my own anger.
Oh, that's a difficult one. So
It's the hardest
yeah,
yeah, why don't I just throw you the most challenging
yeah,
question of all
no,
time?
but
Yeah.
it's so true. And I think for me, the more that I'm practicing it, the more that I'm becoming more proactive
Hmm.
versus reactive. But we're all going to be reactive. And so going through the method after the fact and saying, in
Yeah.
that moment, what could I have done instead?
Hmm.
I could have, I could have identified that my chest was feeling really tight, and that's a trigger for me. That's typically for me what happens, or I'll start sweating.
Hmm.
So you kind of start to learn your own trigger points along the way and how that shows up in your body. And
Hmm.
so going back through, okay, in this scenario, I did lose it, but I could have gone through it if I would have, in hindsight, let's walk through what that would have looked like. Then now that you're calm, because maybe it has taken a little while, like you said, the repair is such an important part. But if you're not ready for it, you're not ready for it. But if you
Hmm.
have that moment to even do the align method, that can actually you become more aware of the situation. You're not angry anymore. You've grounded yourself. And now you're able to do that repair and that nurture piece. And so going back through it is one. That will just help you practice in general. Or
Hmm.
at the end, really giving yourself just that grace piece and repairing. So
Hmm.
if it might take a line to get you to the repair, or if you have other techniques to get you to the repair, it's so much more important, I think, than anything else. We're all going to make mistakes. As much as I'm talking about this and doing it, I mean, I probably yelled at them 3 to 4 times in the last 2 days. Like,
Yep. Yep.
it
Yeah.
still happens. We're human beings. And so you just have to allow yourself to reset and
Hmm.
apologize without the but,
Yeah.
apologize, really own those mistakes. And you'll watch a beautiful thing. Several weeks ago, we're coming home from flag football. I had mentioned how my son does get very upset after. So he was spiraling. He was very frustrated with us. And I said, buddy, like I know that you're mad, but you can't be mean. Like we're here with you. I know that you're upset about this game. I totally get it. And then he kind of kept going. And then a few minutes later, he had a moment of pause and he said, I'm sorry. I'm just really frustrated about this game. I'm not mad at anyone. And my husband and I looked at each other
Hmm.
like, what? This is a first. This happened. So he's finally hearing that apology that's coming from us, where we're saying, hey, I'm really sorry. I didn't eat earlier, or I was upset because of a work phone call. It had nothing to do with you, and that's why I reacted, or I'm just really overwhelmed because I have so much stuff going on. Now that we're apologizing that much, I'm watching him apologize in the same way. And it's a
Yeah.
beautiful thing to see that he's mirroring our behavior.
Right. And taking responsibility for the emotional outburst, or taking responsibility for whatever behavior, they exhibited at the time, and like kind of like, oh, that was on me. It's so easy, especially for kids who are neurodivergent, particularly because they constantly feel misunderstood. And it's like, then they want to defend or blame others for their behavior and for that humility that you're exhibiting. And then your kids are able to say, oh, no, this was on me. I'm just not, able to be calm right now and I'm taking it out on you. So huge. I love it.
Which
Um,
several years ago it would have been, if he tripped, Mom, why'd you make me trip? And I'm
yeah.
like, well, I wasn't even standing there. There's
Yeah.
that you've slowly watched them to start to take that accountability for their
Yeah.
own emotions and their own actions.
And I think we often think it's developmental, which it is, but it is also parenting changes. So, like, when we do shift in our family, like you said, really kind of doubling down on your own methodology and going, okay, yes, I am going to practice the line, as much as I can, like, really getting, I know with my philosophies and concepts and tools, the deeper they get inside of me, then the more effective they are. And then I can really, I'm like, oh no, this actually really does work. It's really funny when I'm dysregulated and my husband will be like, do you need, I know a parenting coach. Did you, it's like, he's just being funny. Well, tell me about your books too, because I wanted to talk about Purposely Me, because I wasn't sure, are they for like children to read and are they theme based? Like, tell us about the book series that you created.
Yes. So there are 14 books within the series. It is a classroom of children, so you will see recurring characters throughout the books. Each one is tackling a hard topic. So they are illustrated, they are for children. It's a fourth grade classroom. I hoping that it will really be elementary school kids because I think kindergarten and up to fourth, they will aspire to be the older kids. They're going to learn from them as well. And I have found that there is a pivotal point in third grade where a lot of the hormones come out. There's a lot of conflict, and they're kind of reflecting on a previous conflict that maybe they had. But the books are centered around hard topics like bullying, ADHD, autism, dyslexia. There's one on executive functioning. There's ones around school drills. So they are touching on topics that are difficult to have conversations with children about, or even for those who might be neurotypical to maybe understand their friend a little bit more. And so in the back, there's a glossary of terms that goes along with it, as well as discussion questions. My hope is to also get these into schools so that parents and teachers alike will have that opportunity to have some of those difficult conversations. But as I've had many therapists and OTs and teachers and principals even read this series, they are finding themselves in some of the books and saying, oh, I see myself in this one, and I see my son or daughter in another book. And so it might be an eye-opening moment, as I have met many parents who didn't realize they had ADHD or even autism or other neurodiversities until their child went through it. And then they started going through their children's exam and putting everything down on paper and saying, oh, wow, that's me. So I think it's eye-opening for parents. And then I think of those who might, there's even one on Down syndrome. I have a friend that had a baby with Down syndrome. And so it's centered around her story. And as hopefully there's so much joy in children with Down syndrome. And so there might be more adults that are autistic or have ADHD and they don't have that attention span to dive into a self-help book, that they find these, really impactful in that way. So, the idea is elementary school children, but I think that it can appeal to an older audience as well, really depending on what the topic is. But the hope is that if a child feels a little bit less alone in their own brain. I've channeled my own inner child and experiences through these books. It's been extremely cathartic to write. I've channeled experiences of both of my children, and they keep giving me more and more ideas to take it even further. And the central theme is, what is my purpose? Why am I here? Is it to do this or that? And then that's answered by the end as well. So I think there's a lot of questions that are in children's minds. They're constantly thinking, and a lot of negative thought patterns that happen, especially with those who are neurodiverse. And so this will allow for them to say, I'm not alone, and bring along affirmations at the same time, like I am brave or I am resilient, that will really help them through those types of conflicts.
Oh, so beautiful. So where can people get the books?
So the first actually will be launched, I think, November 1st, and then
Okay.
we'll be doing one a month after that for the next year. If you go to my website, it's saralewishartley.com, and that's Sarah without an H. And follow me on Instagram at Sara Lewis Hartley. I will release all of the book updates. There are a lot of calming strategies. And my aligned parenting method, you can actually download that for free at my website.
Okay, great. Yeah, so people can hop on your website and get that, connect with you on Instagram. And thank you for your work and what you're doing to help parents. And really, my mission is to heal the next generation in advance. And I think about kids who get wounded in childhood because they're neurodivergent and misunderstood. And then they carry those wounds with them throughout their life. And the more education we all have, and the more parents can parent their children in a way that doesn't create those wounds. I just get so excited to think about a generation of kids who doesn't have to recover from their childhood, what that could look like for them. I think so many of us have spent so much time recovering from our childhood. And what would it look like if we didn't? Yeah.
I think you and I have the same philosophy and hope for the next generation. That's exactly what I hope for them as well.
Yeah. So these books are important. And yeah, thank you. Thanks for being on the podcast.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Hey, Mama, if you enjoyed this podcast episode, I want to encourage you to do two things. The first is go to my website, calmmamacoaching.com, and get a copy of the Stop Yelling cheat sheet. You'll get a step-by-step breakdown of the most important tool I teach, which is the pause break. And you'll also get 40 ideas to reset your body and balance your nervous system so you don't have to yell at your kids. You can get a copy of that, again, at my website, calmmamacoaching.com/stop yelling. The other thing I'd love for you to do is go to Apple Podcasts and rate and review this podcast so that other moms can discover empowering and helpful, practical parenting strategies, just like you did today. Thanks so much for listening to the podcast. It means a lot to be in your ear every week and to support you on your parenting journey.